all the 47 counties and stakeholders went to the county of Kakamega for the 5th annual devolution conference. And out of that came one of the biggest stories of the past 2 weeks, and that is Raila Odinga's proposal for a 3-tier system of government. Now, what he says is that the counties, as are currently constituted, are not economically viable, and they need there is need for bigger entities, and that is 14 regional governments to be able to coordinate the implementation of devolution. Let's listen to what was said by Raila Odinga on that devolution conference, of course, and the response by the Deputy President, William Ruto.
The Boma's draft constitution divided Kenya into 14 regions, each made up of several districts or counties. The intention was to create units with a size and population that made them economically viable, to look at how to recover this original spirit. My proposal is that we adopt a 3-tier system that retains the current counties, creates regional or provincial governments, and retains the national government with a very clear formula for revenue sharing.
Whether we are looking at expanding the executive or we are looking at entrenching devolution, these are issues that can be prosecuted without engaging in billion-shilling referenda. There are issues we can sort out without reference to any referendum. These are issues we can deal with. And in any case, if there is going to be a suggestion on arranging or rearranging devolution, good people, it cannot be creating another layer. It should be taking the counties to the wards. It cannot be devolution upwards. It will have to be devolution downwards. That is where devolution needs to go. So, and that is a discussion that we can have, and we don't have to change the constitution to achieve that. In fact, you know, the challenge we have as a country is what the Chinese said, that a bad workman quarrels with his tools. You know? If somebody is a bad workman, he will try and blame, or it's the constitution which has a problem, or it is the county government which is the problem, or it is the county assembly which is the problem, or it is the this or that. Because he's a bad workman, he wants to quarrel with his tools and explain and get excuses to explain his failure.
William Ruto and Raila Odinga going ham at the devolution conference in Kakamega this past week. So there's a lot of politics in this thing. The Jubilee people, allied to William Ruto, saying that Raila Odinga is trying to introduce changes to the executive systems through the back door, saying that it is about devolution. Raila Odinga saying it's about devolution, he's not looking for any job, he's just looking out for the welfare of Kenyans. But before we get into the politics, let's talk about this thing. I mean, so Ruto says devolution must be downwards. Raila Odinga says it is not economically viable to use the 47 counties as they are. They do not have enough numbers in terms of population and all that. Dismas, let me start with you. Do we have the wrong kind of devolution in the 2010 Constitution?
For me, in my view, we have the right kind of devolution, to use your words. The biggest challenge you have is the people who are driving that devolution. When the Deputy President says that a bad workman is always quarreling with his tools, the people who are clapping, who are very excited with that statement, are in fact the bad workmen. Those are governors who are seated there, those governors, those MCA, have let Kenyans down in a manner that there's no English word to describe that. If you go to the Sunday Standard, page 10, there's a story done by Wafula, which says up to last year, 130 billion, which is 41% of the county budgets, was spent on personal emoluments. So these folks are using 130 billion to buy top-of-the-range vehicles, to buy choppers, to crack sexual jokes at the expense of addressing the flooding situation in Kenya. Those are the people that we are supposed to be worried of. And when Raila Odinga says maybe we need to look at whether or not it makes sense to have a regional government, and the deputy president says that doesn't seem to make sense, we should be encouraging those kind of conversations. Because for the longest time we've said, when Raila speaks, it's about tribalism. When Ruto speaks, it's about tribalism. Here are now leaders who are bringing ideas to the table. Maybe what you should be asking Raila Odinga is, when you say you want another level of government, what exactly do you mean? When Ruto says that you are quarreling with your tools, he should be asking the guys who are in front of him why they go to Kakamega and are cracking sexual jokes 24 hours instead of asking themselves, how does this devolution work for Kenya? And in my view, in as much as Raila made a statement that politicians consider to be not very exciting, that it's not very popular, we ask ourselves, are those 47 counties really tenable? No. You've got some counties whose average voting base is 200,000. It doesn't make sense. We should collapse them, maybe even less than 14, and ensure...
So you support Raila Odinga's proposal?
One would support the proposal of having 14 counties, regional centers, provincial governments, whichever name we want to use, provided you are not adding layers. How come there's no politician in Kenya today who has the energy or even the guts to say that we don't need 47 counties because it's going to cost them their votes during the next election? But all of us know, if you go to the streets, people know that in fact we don't need 47 counties.
Is that a fact though? Because let me bring you Mark. Can you go, let me use your county, Bungoma. People have had counties for the last, they have had a county for the last 5 years. They have tasted the benefits. They know what it can bring to them. They know the challenges. Can you go to them and then take away the county from them again? Will they agree with you?
That would be an absolute exercise in foolishness, because the reality of the matter is that even with the corruption that we say county governments have,
yes,
the truth of the matter is if you go to Turkana today, they're no longer saying, let's go to Kenya, because they feel Kenyan. If you go to Northeastern today, they're no longer saying, let's go to Kenya, because they feel Kenyan. Secondly, the population debate really does not hold water. You've got states that, like Qatar, which have fewer people than the city of Nairobi. Success of any economy has nothing to do with the number of people in that particular country. That does not hold water at all. Japan, one of the leading economies in this world, does not have a huge population. Switzerland does not have a huge population. The same argument, the United States has nearly 500 million people. So you cannot base the dynamics of economy purely on population. However, the truth of the matter is this, that I disagree with Raila Odinga in the need of creating a provincial administration, because the question must be asked, if all these units are to be independent, which is the whole idea of devolution, what then would be a guy whose position is between the president and the county government? What would he be doing? What exactly would be his role? What would we be voting for him to do? What I do think needs to happen in this country, and I agree with the deputy president, on both the political side and the logic side. And I'll start with the logic side. What needs to happen with county governments, and I said this in the last show, that county governments in Kenya are limited by way of the revenues they can collect. And if they're limited by way of the revenues they can collect, then they're limited by way of how many businesses and entrepreneurs and skilled workforce they can entice to come into their counties. This is what I mean. If VAT is standard across the country, if corporate tax is standard throughout the country, and income tax is standard throughout the country, why in God's name would I go live in Meru when I'm going to pay the same I pay in Nairobi, just less in terms of the cost of living? Now, what needs to happen if devolution is to work, then a percentage of our taxes need to be collected at the county level, and not just parking fees and land rates. They need to be able to say that VAT in Nairobi is 18% and VAT in Kiambu is 17%. Therefore, you are enticed to spend more in Kiambu than you are in Nairobi, but Nairobi can take the hit because it has 60% of the GDP. This is what happens in Switzerland. This is what happens in the United States. This is what happens in Germany. And that system has been proven to work. So where I agree with Raila is we need to find a way of empowering county governments to be collectors of their own revenue and not waiting on the exchequer to give them money. On the political side of things, a referendum at this point in time is unnecessarily expensive, and we do not need to change the constitution. We have a position called CAS today. No one needed to even go to parliament to approve it. The president has power enough today to appoint what we can call a chief minister and give him powers to check his government. At the same time, you have the capacity to simply change the laws of nomination that allow the leader of opposition to be nominated into parliament. Let us not reinvent the wheel in a process that can be fixed without referenda.
Husband, would you say that devolution is working as it is?
You know, Ben, in the last few years, we've actually seen the fruits of devolution everywhere. You go to Migori, you go to Kakamega, you go to Muranga, you'll see that folks in the deep interior of the counties have tap water. You know, folks have good roads that they can transport their farm produce to the market. And to that extent, you can actually see that there are people who appreciate what devolution has done to their lives because it has developed them in the sense that they are not the same way they were 5 or 6 years ago.
So then does Raila have a point?
Raila has a point, and I want to agree with both Raila Odinga and the deputy president. Now, I agree with Raila for the simple reason that I don't think as it is right now, we have a very clear formula for revenue sharing. And to that extent, whatever he's suggesting, because he's not just talking about creating that third tier, he's talking about creating that third tier, creating some provincial administration of sort, and finding a clear-cut way of, distributing revenue from the national government to the county government. So the last bit of it is plausible. It's something that we need to have a conversation on. And again, I don't think Raila Odinga is an ordinary Kenyan to just come up with something. He has the intellectual, he has the financial, and probably the intelligent infrastructure to come up with something that has already been processed. And to that extent, we cannot dismiss what Raila Odinga is saying. It is just a question of how then do we engage with what he has proposed. And the key focus should be, are we going to have devolution move a notch high in terms of changing the lives of Kenyans by creating another bureaucratic layer? Is it really economically viable to have another layer that will be, eating into our revenue and probably creating more bureaucracy, delay in disbursement of funds, and still have devolution work? So those are questions that we need to engage with. And then secondly, you may also want to look at what Raila is suggesting and ask yourself, is it something that can be done without even interfering with the Constitution? If you go to Standard, page 11, you'll see that we have regional blocks already. And I think these regional blocks are actually coming together economic blocks for purposes of being economically viable. And when they coalesce voluntarily, it means that they are coalescing on some economic strength, in which case each county is coming with something that can add onto the table. Rather than entrenching in the law and grouping counties together, I think going the regional economic block by different governors taking initiatives is actually the way to go. In which case, we can still interrogate whatever Raila suggested and say that this is something that can be done and this cannot be done. This needs legislation, this one does not need. But I also agree with the deputy president that we should not complain so much about devolution. We should be asking ourselves, what exactly are we doing to make devolution work, beginning from the governors, MCAs, senators, and Kenyans. And we must have something to show in terms of our contribution to this devolution. Do governors have anything to show? Some have, some don't. I mean, all they have is opulence and big cars that we can see around. So it is, for me, it is a question of having these two different schools of thought engage. And I don't think it's a bad thing that the deputy president and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga are taking different positions. For me, it is good, because in terms of sparking that interest in this conversation, it is sparking that interest in Kenyans.
Kipchumba, there are people saying, as we interrogate this, that we already have a very, because of devolution after the 2010 constitution, after 2013, we've had the wage bill has ballooned. Can we then again increase that more, a bit more with another level of government?
Ben, I will agree and disagree with that group of individuals.
Right.
But what we must appreciate is that for the first time in this country, we are entertaining a theoretical discourse of the devolution. We have always talked about devolution, but in passing and in political circles. When we have two national leaders engaging on what devolution is and what it should be, it is a work in the right direction. But what I tend to gather is that why are we trying to do the work of Senate through referenda and all other things? We have a Senate which will entrench devolution in this country, entrench and protect. And I would like to correct Owila. We have a whole chapter 11 of the Constitution dealing with issues of resource sharing. So I don't think we lack laws around that area. What we need to strengthen is to strengthen devolution both vertically and horizontally. Vertically in that the interrelationship between the both level of government must be enhanced. And the horizontal, we must not devolve resources from the national government to the sub-county headquarters and leave it there. We must go all the way to the ward level. And that can be done. We have the infrastructure under the County Governments Act. It is there. What we lack is the goodwill and the time. Most of our governors and the people in that type of government have spent most of the time in what my colleagues have called randy life. We spend a whole week to discuss sexual escapades and to discuss a 24 working economy, which is suited for the leaders and not the people. Devolution is the only fruit that went all the way to the common mwananchi. The other fruits went to the leaders. Actually, half of the fruits remained with the leadership.
Do you believe this proposal by Raila Odinga then will be taking away that fruit from the people?
What we need to do is this. We must have devolution going to the deepest of the villages. We must not come back again to regroup in centers. I encourage and I support what is happening. We have the North Rift Economic Bloc, NOREB, we have Lake Region, we have Amanda Triangle,
Southeastern Kenya.
Southeastern Kenya. Those things should be encouraged. But what Senate should do, they should have a law that regulates this kind of grouping. Look at it this way. You cannot have a county in 3 groups and issues of value for the money will be an issue because you cannot contribute to NOREB. Let's say Nandi County, for example. They are in 2 economic blocks. They are in NOREB and they are in Lake Region. What are the values or what value do the people of Nandi County get in these 2 economic regions? And we must also make it a trite law that you cannot belong to more than 1 block. The same way you cannot belong to more than 1 circle. It is law. The other thing we must look at in this devolution, even as we praise devolution, we must understand that there are excesses perpetrated by the brilliant Kenyans who went back to the counties. Issues of people doing what we call expenditure at the source. Senate and the people in charge of sharing resources should look at how can we best minimize expenditure at the source, because it is an avenue for corruption. Other things we must look at is, do we even need the devolution conference? In my honest view, no. Why? Because it is a paid
we'll
up.
Get to that.
It is a paid up comedy show.
So you're saying this is a work of the Senate. Senate can do this.
If Senate is serious with its work and it's avoid melodrama and push and pull, they can have their acts together and get something done.
All right. So what's the way forward, Dismas? If the country was to go with Raila's, what would that mean, and vice versa?
In my view, Raila Odinga has brought forward a proposal. Ruto has brought forward a proposal. Musalia, I see in the newspapers today, has brought forward a proposal. We need to have these intellectual intercourse and come up with a way forward. What best works for Kenya? It may just be the case that having a 3-tier governance system delivers more value, because it depends on how the public servants have been socialized. Because, you know, all over the world, we keep on going to South Korea and Singapore. The public servants understand their work is to catalyze socio-economic activities, make sure that the nation runs. But in Kenya, it seems the case that the moment you get a public office or you become a governor or any of these elected positions, your priority list is to use your public office as a factor of production to work on your bank balance. And that's what was happening in Kakamega. Essentially, governors were just in competition. What is the size of your car? How many handlers do you have? Some governors even had guys with shoe brushes because it was a bit muddy. So you've carried a fella all the way 100 kilometers to come and brush your shoes,
all right, it's a debate
which is unacceptable.
All right, it's a debate that has been splitting opinion. The Raila Odinga's NASA co-principals, Musalia, Mudavadi, and Moses Wetangula also did react to this, dismissing that proposal, calling it selfish.
Tulionayo executive haijibi maswali sawasawa kwa bunge. Hata imefika wakati executive inaenda paka inafanya lecture kwa zile kamati za bunge, paka unashindwa nani ana mamlaka, bunge ama huyo executive.
Mambo ya kusema ati tulete another tier of government, hiyo ni mambo ambayo hatuwezi kukubali. Tuna ugatuzi na tuna jukumu ya kuhakikisha ugatuzi unafanya kazi. How can you start an experiment before the experiment you are going on with has not been perfected?
Hii mchezo yenu yenye mnataka tupendue katiba ili nyinyi watatu mjiamulie ni nani atakuwa rais, nani atakuwa prime minister, na nani atakuwa deputy. I want to tell you, we are going to face you at the referendum and we are going to defeat you in that hyena's agenda ambayo iko personal.
All right, some more reactions to that proposal. And Mark, it is being received with a lot of salt in some areas, this proposal.
It would be very salty because the intentions of it are not quite clear. And the problem is when you prescribe a medicine to a disease you've not explained to me, then I'm most likely going to reject this medicine. However, the one thing I'm really grateful for is that we have a politics in this country for once where we're talking about the issues that need to be addressed. Kenya is a very nubile democracy. And I keep saying, though people argue they're not forms of democracy, I keep saying Kenya needs its own form of democracy. We need to find uniquely Kenyan solutions for uniquely Kenyan problems. And this has been proven time and time again, that when Kenyans sit down and decide to solve problems our way, then we get ahead much faster. What must happen in this country pretty quickly is this. We must first of all decide what we are doing with county governments. I think they're critical, but we don't know what we are doing to them. And it does not make sense to me that county governments should be 90 to 99% dependent on the national government for their resources. It does not make sense because it makes you extensions of the executive. Now, the whole reason why you do devolution is so that you can have diversity. And how does diversity come? Today, the state of California has a bigger economy than Italy. Okay, the state of Texas has an equally big economy. By itself, it can compete with the European countries. And this is what makes the United States of America great. Because you've got to be able to nurture devolution in a way that the people of Kisumu can shape their destiny in a different way from their neighbors in Migori, from their neighbors in Homa Bay, from their neighbors in Bungoma. This is what we must cultivate. The diversity within county governments is what makes a nation great. And the questions we need to ask ourselves is not just the creation of positions, but how do we empower county governments to be able to stand by themselves? That's what needs to happen. It will be a great headache of the head of the president, because then the government would know that we are getting, let's say VAT remains at 16%. They're getting 16%.
Right.
But you allow county governments to add a 1, 2, 10% if they want on top of the 16%. What does that mean? That the national government remains receiving the same amount of money without wild worry about what is happening within county governments. Right. Then you will also deal with the nonsense we deal with every time when county governments are trading accusations between the national government and local government. And then perhaps our deputy governors would not be so idle that they are found with in weird places.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Very dynamic discussion on this. When we come back after this quick commercial break, we'll get into the politics of it. And in this way, there are two issues here. There's an issue of a new third tier of government, which would require a referendum. And there has been calls for a parliamentary kind of system of governance that would also require a referendum. And all these things were contained in the Bomas draft. That is what we talk about. Is it ghosts from the Bomas coming to haunt us? What gives? And also we talk about what we have heard from our sources, from the think tanks, of what some of these proposals are actually doing. Don't go too far. This is Sunday edition.